be a better CEO. Professionals in the top of their game seek to secure that spot by hiring coaches with accolades, signing up for programs with promises, reading books by gurus with guarantees, and leaning on mentors with track records. To be a better CEO, you suggest a different route. Please share the story behind the Psychedelic CEO.
Thank you, Allié and Jack, and pleased to be here. Yeah, the story behind the Psychedelic CEO is somewhat interesting. The principle of the whole thing is really based on this shamanic idea that humans are wounded, leaders are human, and a healed leader is a better leader. So that's really the theme of this entire book. How I got there was I was one of those wounded leaders. And it began about around my 60th birthday when I found myself sitting on a chair watching TV alone on my 60th birthday with a bottle of wine, flipping through TV channels, trying to find something to just take my mind off my sort of depression and despair at that point in my life. And I came across a Hugh Grant movie called The Rewrite. And this turned out to be really foreshadowing the next 5 years of my life, leading me to where I am today. I spent my entire career in life really trying to be exceptional, trying to find myself, but yet I found myself on my 60th birthday alone, depressed, possibly suicidal, and wondering what the hell had really all of this been about. And so, even when I made a list of, on one side of my failures, I had a failed marriage, I had one failed company, I had issues with alcohol, and on and on. I had a lot of dysfunctional behaviors as well. And then I had a list of accomplishments that I was very proud of, and they were, significant within my realm. I thought, well, if you looked at this objectively, you'd say this is just sort of a normal life by this point in time. And yet I felt very dark and very depressed and very much like a failure. And when I dug deeper into that, I realized I'd always felt that way. No matter what I was accomplishing, no matter how good things were objectively in my life, something had always been missing. Something was always absent. Something was always wrong internally. One of my best friends, a musician who lived, at the opposite end of the spectrum on $1,500 a month, playing guitar and fishing, used to say to me regularly, man, with everything you've done, I cannot, and everything you have, I can't understand why you're not happy. And that was the key question. So I thought, well, I need to do something about it. And I spent the next several years delving deep into consciousness and spirituality, reading, meditation, yoga. I took a yoga teacher training course, consciousness, workshops, shamanism, that type of thing. And I'd come across psychedelics many times, but was really kind of afraid to try it because I was part of that old school that it was going to be a loss of control and I would just go crazy. But it got to a point where I thought, well, I'm pretty crazy. I feel pretty crazy anyway. And then ran into a friend at a coffee shop and who I hadn't seen in a while, and asked her what she was up to. And she said, I'm going to Costa Rica to do ayahuasca. And I went, really? Well, let me know how it goes because I'm interested. And so she came back, and a month later sent me a text with a single word text that just said go. And so so I signed up and went to Costa Rica and ended up doing 2 weeks down there at Rhythmia, and I did about 3.5 total days in an altered state of consciousness, which was 8 ceremonies over a 2-week period, and had profound healing effects and insights and just an incredible life experience. And when I came out of that with that renewed sense of self and hope and love and generosity and service, the idea that I wanted to be of service, I thought, well, I wonder if this could be a good leadership tool for people, leading organizations, leading businesses, or in fact, just leading themselves. And I came up with this idea that CEO was this cultural mantra that everybody wanted to be exceptional, be a CEO, but it really should mean something else. It should mean consciousness and empathy and openness. I thought, well, that's leading our own life. We need to be leaders in our own life, but nevertheless, could it be a valuable leadership tool? And so that led to writing the book.
Wow.
Just say that again. What is CEO? What should CEO be again?
Conscious, empathetic, and open.
I love that. And just so everyone knows, what is ayahuasca? Because Allie and I have never tried it.
Ayahuasca is an Amazonian plant medicine. It's a tea, essentially, that is a combination of a vine and a leaf that is brewed in an intentional spiritual manner by the shaman who's going to serve it. And it's a very rigorous process, and this thick, gooey, very, very unappealing mud-like brew is a psychoactive substance. It's called ayahuasca.
Wow.
Awesome. It's mind-opening.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
All right. So in a health and wellness landscape divided between technological Western medicine and a traditional Eastern medicine, where do psychedelics fit in? Is there a science to support it?
Well, psychedelics are part of, or in the Western definition, are known as entheogens. So they're substances that induce altered perceptions and moods, cognition, consciousness, and behavior. So they change a whole lot of brain functions. And psychedelics are beginning to be understood as the bridge between Western logic and Eastern spirituality. It's becoming a very powerful doorway for those two different mindsets to meet. And some of the healing effects of psychedelics, of course, are well known. You read about it in the news all the time, and there's tremendous research being done. The positive impact on depression and anxiety, PTSD, alcoholism, weight loss, smoking, you name it, there seem to be positive outcomes being documented, not only anecdotally, but now within controlled experiments in the research labs. You know, the world of Western medicine, it hinges on a paternalistic view or a mechanistic view of the body. And as that is, it's like an automobile, and you need to be able to identify the problem, reduce it down to a single problem, measure it, and then just solve for that particular symptom. Eastern medicine is a very broad experience of mind, body, spirit, and all those weave together to create either a healthy or unhealthy individual. In fact, in a lot of indigenous traditions, they believe that illness originates from an illness in the spirit or the soul loss, and that type of thing. So psychedelics themselves are bringing the modern science community into the awareness that there is something going on in realms that can't necessarily be identified and measured in their totality right now, but in fact are incredibly powerful, and the outcomes are incontrovertible. It's that ineffable thing. And, you know, for instance, in Western medicine, the placebo effect is routinely discounted as being nonsense or something, a fluke. You know, somebody healed cancer, oh, well, it was just a placebo, is what we often hear. Whereas in Eastern medicine, the placebo effect is accessing the highest realms of healing consciousness, and in fact is the answer to healing. And psychedelics are beginning to allow the Western mind to get around this. So, you know, they are natural plants from the earth. A few are synthetics like LSD and MDMA, but what is happening in the labs with the neuroscientists is that they are beginning to identify and agree that under psychedelics, ego dissolution or ego death, which the Buddhists and other traditions routinely talk about, is in fact an outcome of the psychedelic experience. So, you know, you can read literature that refers directly to this. They call it, they have to use, you know, their own jargon. They call them primary states of consciousness. But what they're finding is that psychedelics create a momentary disruption of our neural patterns, of our everyday thoughts in the brain. There are 5 parts of the brain called the default mode network, and psychedelics disrupt that network. They create a state of chaos momentarily, which is ego death, ego dissolution. And within that, healing occurs, and it occurs routinely and predictably. So that's an interesting outcome that is now being done through imaging, fMRI, which is just imaging techniques for looking at the brain and the patterns in the brain. You know, another outcome at the chemical level, which is lending credence to the whole thing, is that the psilocybin molecule from magic mushrooms, for instance, is now shown to bind to receptors called 5-HT2A receptors. They sit in the cerebral cortex of the brain, which is one of the 5 parts of the brain that form the default mode network. And the neurons in the host neurons get excited, and they're out of control. They are led into a state of entropy or disorder. And right in that state of disorder, they're seeing that's where the therapeutic and experiential outcomes are occurring. So that's now being measured. So that's a little bit of, scientific voodoo, but the fact is they're seeing there are chemical responses in the brain that are in fact helping with the healing process. They still can't identify all the healing that occurs in the hallucinogenic state, but a lot of the researchers are starting to feel that state that can't be really fully defined yet is where the healing really occurs. Gotcha. And that's where Eastern mysticism and Western medicine are converging.
Beautifully put.
Yeah,
like,
no, wow. That's amazing.
But that does lead me to a question of how do you control excess or abuse in psychedelics?
Well, psychedelics are shown to be non-addictive. It's really up to this is a fact that they are non-addictive, and unlike SSRIs, which is typical antidepressants that are addictive. You have to keep taking them on and on. Now there are certain psychedelics where, like ketamine, which does require repeat usage to maintain its effects, but that is very different from being addictive. So there's no evidence whatsoever that psychedelics are addictive.
That's great.
Yeah, that's great to know for sure. I mean, there's so much that so many need to know and need to be brought up to speed on. Let's speak about you as an individual. As a former CEO, company founder, participating professional geologist in the energy sector, pre-psychedelics, you've led teams around the world, including Austria, Albania, Croatia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, the US, Canada. You even played a key role in discovering one of the largest gas fields in Pakistan. Not to mention, along the way, you were instrumental in raising over $1 billion in capital. What was it that made you shift your focus from your own personal success to the success of others? What was that shift? What was it?
That's an interesting question. It came about through the entire ayahuasca experience in Costa Rica. One of the direct outcomes for many people of psychedelics is you become less self-focused. You become more self-aware in the sense of your true nature, your divine nature, but you're less self-focused. And so it means you start to look at others and you have more empathy and you care about others and you wonder if there's a way you can help. I've been drawn to more of a service mindset as opposed to a selfish taking mindset. And that's a direct outcome of psychedelics. But the real question for me, having done all these things around the world, is I was always exploring. That was the business I was in, the business of oil and gas exploration. And the question I often had is, what am I really exploring for here? We're exploring for energy, and we're exploring for resources, and we're exploring for wealth, that the earth has. But it turned out that what I was really exploring for was love and recognition and to be seen. I had a lot of very unhealthy drives that were wound-based. And in fact, I couldn't find enough oil and gas to be satisfied. I couldn't make enough money to be satisfied. I couldn't achieve enough to be satisfied. And the psychedelic journey revealed this to me. And this was all based on my own wounding at birth and through my early childhood and some of the issues with abuse and my father's alcoholism, and all of these things combined left a very large wound that I constantly tried to fill. And so I began to look around me after doing the psychedelic journeys in Costa Rica and talk to other business people and look at them in a different light. And I thought, I wonder if this is the case for many people who are drawn to excessive achievement and exceptionalism, and they're trying incredibly hard to move up, according to that cultural trope of being the top dog. And I also began to look at the leadership industry because I could see that leadership had not really changed fundamentally in many sectors, many parts of the world. Such a complaint. People were looking for great leaders and no one could identify any. And I thought, well, what's going on here? It seemed like everybody I met in that time was a leadership coach or an executive development person or an advisor. And then when I looked deeper, most of them had never started a company, never raised any money, never run a company, and they're advising people that are doing all of these things. And I thought, man, there's a real gap here. This industry, leadership industry, doesn't seem to be serving any real purpose. And I wondered if there was a way I could help with that. And I looked at the research on leadership, and it was quite clear that issues of ego and power and insecurity and greed and those types of things still prevail, despite endless leadership training seminars and workshops. Nobody really changed fundamentally in companies. So this whole leadership paradigm just didn't seem to work. And I thought, well, what if I could get the message out that psychedelics are a tool, one tool of many that could be used to really bring people in touch with their wounds, heal them efficiently and elegantly, and allow them to then conduct themselves in a better way in whatever leadership role they were in. So I felt it could become, a really interesting leadership tool.
I mean, that's really profound.
Absolutely.
Besides doing billion-dollar raises and going on a self journey, you make music. It's a beautiful music. We dabbled in a little bit, listened to it, love it.
Very much enjoyed.
Describe the music you make and why you make it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for taking time to listen to it. And
It's really
music's been a dominant motif for me for a long time, coming from a musical family and musical background. I didn't really start playing music till I was 19. I'd been a jock and a real sports fanatic up until that time, but my parents were both, well-known old-time musicians in Manitoba, both being in the Manitoba Hall of Fame. As my mother is a piano player and my stepfather is a fiddle player, and he taught me to play guitar. And the minute I picked up a guitar, it lit up something inside me. It took me out of all the anxiety and all the depression, all the uncertainty, even as a young man. And it stayed there. It just stayed there as being an oasis for me through my entire life. So I can always go to it to find a mode of, authentic expression or expressing my soul or spirit. And it was always a place of purity. So it was good medicine. The music was good medicine. And as a songwriter, some of the things I write are autobiographical and others are stories of others, but they always have an element of, the inner workings of the person involved. And that always interests me, people's stories and the common ground we have. I recorded a CD when I lived and worked in Vienna, for instance, many, many years ago. And it was really about my experience as a foreigner in a foreign country, and also some of the experiences that some of my Austrian friends had talked about and being in their experiences in their world. So, it's not limited to my own story. It's also about other people's stories, that type of thing.
Well, there's some depth to the songs, and the wordplay is phenomenal. Melodic and phenomenal writing.
Oh yeah, I mean, just everything about it just feels amazing. Yeah. So we feel you, we hear you, and we feel you. One last question for you tonight, Murray. If there was just one lesson that you'd like people to take away from your book, because there are many, from reading the Psychedelic CEO, what would that be? What is that one lesson that you want your words to share?
That's an excellent question. There's two small parts to that question. The first one being that you're more than you think you are, but that knowledge comes from within, and exploring the depths of your being will reveal that to you, and not the world of outward achievement that will never make it. And secondly, the idea that a healed leader is a better leader And we all are leaders in our own lives, regardless of where we are and what we're doing. And we all need to be better leaders, I believe, and we can be better leaders, irrespective of title. We can be more conscious, we can be more empathetic, and we can be more open.
Well, that's a great lesson.
Yes.
Drop the mic, Mark. that was yeah. Yeah.
There's no words in that. That says it all.
I think what it says is something that we need to say is just thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing a bit of yourself, of your book, of your life, and for helping us become a bit more aware now. Thank you.
And thank you both. It's been a great honor to speak with you both. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.